Good evening, everybody. Stephen Ruderman coming to you live here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I am down here for 8 nights for spring training, Giants spring training. I'll be at my first game in the press box tomorrow as the Giants play the Texas Rangers. The Giants are off to a 10-2 start here in the spring, and obviously, spring training doesn't mean anything in terms of wins and losses at the end of the day, but it is pretty cool. We'll get to that later. But what I really want to talk about tonight is personalities and characters and color and what is just so unfortunately lacking in our great game. So 2 bits of news from the umpire world. Phil Cuzzi, who was the oldest man to ever umpire. He became the first man to ever umpire a game at the age of 70 last year. Decided to hang it up. He has retired. And Phil Cuzzi, he was an old school umpire, and he was one of the last of the true old school umpires. And I don't know, perhaps he didn't want to deal with ABS. I don't know why he retired. I was hoping, because old Italians like him, man, they look great in old age. I thought maybe he'd go to his 80s. I seriously did. I'm not in Phil's mind. I wish he could have stuck around longer, but who knows? Maybe he didn't want to deal with ABS. But Phil is hanging it up. Also, Mark Carlson, one of the best umpires in the league, he's hanging it up as well. And Mark, great umpire, he'll now be a supervisor for umpires in Major League Baseball. But let's talk about Phil, and let's talk about umpiring in general. We have seen ABS in effect, and when I see a game paused to turn a ball call that missed less than 1/10 of an inch outside of that stupid box into a strike, it makes me want to pull the remaining hairs that I have on my head out. It is so utterly ridiculous. I have been suggesting that we have a temporary solution where you have a 2-inch buffer zone on all sides of the plate, where if a pitch does not hit the official strike zone, but it hits that buffer zone, all calls are upheld. I also said that pitchers would start complaining. Well, lo and behold, they have. Ryan Thompson, a right-hander for the Arizona Diamondbacks, atta baby Ryan. He got the gist of my idea. Okay, not really. He probably came up with it on his own, but great. Baseball minds think alike. He believes we need a buffer zone, though he says we should do 1 inch. I think it should be 2. This is a quote from Ryan Thompson. The funny part about the challenge system is that just a couple of years ago, we were shaving off as many seconds off the game as possible, even at the risk of injuries, and now we literally pause the game multiple times to see if the umpire was wrong by 0.1 inches. He continued saying, to clarify my position, the challenge system is great to help with egregious mistakes, but the reality that people don't realize is that umpires are really good, and he put really good in all caps, he tweeted this, and no human eye can tell 0.1 inches at 95 miles per hour. It's a guess. Strikes reversed to balls needs a 1-inch buffer, in my opinion. Well, he did put IMO, but you know what he means by my opinion. Either Thompson or another pitcher talked about how he used to get certain pitches, and it's unfortunate he's not going to get those pitches anymore. As I mentioned on my last show, Dan INSOMNIAC, a longtime veteran umpire, in an interview on MLB Network back in 2022, day after Memorial Day, I think, talked about when he first came up through the ranks, and he first came up in 1999 and was hired full-time in 2004, that umpiring was taught calling balls and strikes was taught as an art rather than an exact science. And it was like, what does he mean by that? Because I'd always thought you want to call that box correctly. And he gave some examples talking about giving certain guys finesse pitches a little bit off the corner, etc. And umpiring myself, of course, I went to the Wendelstedt Umpire School twice. I went in 2023 and again in 2025. And to clarify, they don't teach this at umpire school. They will teach you this when you go back home to your local association. A thing about game management, how you umpire you call balls and strikes a certain way, whether you want to get a game going, you name it. In 2018, a longtime veteran umpire, Doug Eddings, really good umpire, really gotten better with age. It was revealed that it was revealed by Brandon Belt after that game. It was on Wednesday, May 15th, Wednesday, May 16th of 2018. The Giants lost that afternoon to the Cincinnati Reds at what was then AT&T Park. And Brandon Belt said in interviews after the game that Doug Eddings was telling guys this game's going quick. It was getaway day. And certain umpires, they like to call strikes on getaway days. Every getaway day, people have flights to catch. Frank Poley was very much known for this, or at least according to Ron Darling, Frank Poley was very much known for this. And pausing the game to overturn a call that was quote unquote missed by less than 1/10 of an inch is beyond the pale, utterly ridiculous. It's insane. Have a 2-inch buffer zone. Any pitch that hits that buffer zone, calls upheld. Give the umpire some game management and play ball. And what's interesting, convenient that we no longer have the stupid, inaccurate box on our telecasts, which was something that was first started by ESPN in 2015. We saw it on opening night of that season on Sunday, April 5th, when the Cubs and the Cardinals played at Wrigley Field. And what was a Wrigley Field which was undergoing renovations at the time. And then we saw Fox put it on their telecast in the 2017 postseason, and then by the 2018 regular season, pretty much every team was putting it there. And I can't help but wonder if that was deliberate, so that they could rally the fans behind ABS. Another one of the precious changes that Rob Manfred wants to put in his hat for the sake of his legacy. Again, I don't know what's going in these guys' heads, but you can't help but wonder. And the animosity that we have, look, umpires have always been yelled at by fans, players, managers, coaches, you name it. Yelling at umpires is a tradition as old as time. But we never had true animosity towards umpires, like where it was actually like a hostile culture towards umpires. And we've seen for a good part of the last 10, 15 years, announcers incessantly criticizing umpires, treating umpires like they're these horrible people. And I can't help but think it's at the very least it's being enabled. It's pretty much being enabled by baseball, but they're not really doing anything to stop it. But I can't help but wonder, again, I don't know what goes behind the scenes, because I'm not privy to any of this. I can only speculate. I can't help but wonder if it's being encouraged. Because now umpires, Dale Scott and a few others have said this, that umpires now are embracing ABS because they're tired of all the pressure. It seems like, I can't help but think this was what Manfred wanted. They wanted to put umpires under the gun so that they would accept this. And you know what's interesting? Every time we have an ejection, ump show, they don't come here to watch you umpire. Okay, if you are told to stop arguing and you keep arguing, you're thrown out. If you make a personal insult towards an umpire, particularly with the word "you" in it, you're thrown out. Boom. But last year, when Phil Cuzzi, an old school umpire, threw Javier Baez out on Memorial Day in Detroit between the Giants and the Tigers, people loved it. And when you have an old school umpire like Phil Cuzzi or Tom Hallion, when his ass was in the jackpot in 2016 with the whole Noah Syndergaard throwing behind Chase Utley thing, people realize, oh, right, fans like this kind of stuff. It's entertaining. And Phil Cuzzi was a character. One of my favorite Phil Cuzzi ejections came in September 2023 when the Astros bench coach Alex Cintron, former Diamondbacks infielder, was yelling at Cuzzi, and Cuzzi takes his mask off and says, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm not going to listen to you. And, in his New Jersey accent. And Cintron yells out, fuck you. And Cuzzi goes, fuck me, fuck you. Give me the baby. There was one ejection, I think back in 2017, where he throws a guy off the bench in Atlanta. I think it was the Pirates. And he goes, you're better than that. You're better than that. And it's a shame that he's no longer going to be umpiring. But speaking of not just great personalities, but great umpires, Bruce Froemming, that old little fat man, has passed away at the age of 86. Last Tuesday night, he fell late at night in his home. He hit his head on hardwood floor, and unfortunately, when you're 86, your body is dealing with a lot of things, and one issue can trigger another, and that's what happened. Bruce was on blood thinners, according to his sons, Stephen and Kevin, or Steve and Kevin. And as a result, there was bleeding in his brain, which they could not stop. And so he passed away last Wednesday. And Bruce was really one of the greatest umpires in the history of the game. And his loss leaves a real void in this game. And he is going to be so, so utterly missed. And, when you had Bruce behind the plate, and you had Eddie Montague refer to him in an article back in 2006 when Bruce umpired his 5,000th game, becoming at the time the second man to do so. He's umpired the third most games behind Bill Clem and behind Joe West. He referred to him as the little fat man. And when you had that little fat man behind the plate, you knew things were you knew things weren't gonna go bad. There's cool little documentary that was thrown together on YouTube. It was made around 2010, I'd like to say, and some current and former umpires were interviewed, Hunter and Harry Wendelstad, Ed Hickox, Marvin Hudson, and a few others, and they talked about how Bruce would run his crew a certain way, and he'd be the guy who'd come up to you when there was a shit house and say, hey, good job, kid. And he was a real character. And towards, Bruce had some great mannerisms. And towards the end of his career, he would just kind of squat not too low. And the thing is, with a lot of the shorter guys like Bruce, they wouldn't squat as low, so they'd be higher ball umpires. And Bruce was one of the last of the true high ball umpires. And then you'd get the strike call on the left-handed batter and just real deliberate. I'm not going to do it real loud because I'm in a hotel room, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. And with the loss of Bruce Froemming, baseball loses one of its remaining personalities. And it's not just umpires that the lack of personalities in baseball has affected. It's affected everyone. Players, coaches, managers, scouts, particularly announcers. And here in 2026, we truly need to bring characters and personalities back into the game. Because back in Bruce's day, you had personalities. Everyone, you had Harry Carey. You had Hank Greenwald, who had a booming personality. Only announced 18 years, which is a shame because he should be in the Hall of Fame. An incredible announcer. Ernie Harwell had a great personality. Bob Uecker had a great personality. Jack Buck wasn't my favorite broadcaster, but he had an incredible personality. The late, great Jerry Coleman. You can hang a star on that baby. Another guy who wasn't my favorite announcer, but had an incredible personality and was so beloved by the fans of Seattle, the late, great Dave Niehaus. They had personalities. They were entertaining. And you don't really have that today, with, the exception of a few of the old guard guys who were grandfathered in, particularly on the Giants and Dwayne Kuiper, Mike Krukow, and John Miller. You don't really have that anymore. Most of the announcers are clean cut. Pretty much same for everyone in baseball. And going back to umpires, back in the 70s and 80s, umpires were actually even celebrated because you had some real personalities. And this is back when you had National League and American League umpires. And in the American League, you had personalities like Ken Kaiser, who was a former wrestler. You look up his ejection with Terry Bevington in 1995. I can't show this stuff because it's property Major League Baseball. Durwood Merrill, big old Texan, real personality. The late great Ron Luciano, who wrote numerous books. And actually, Durwood Merrill wrote a book too. The book was called "You're Out and You're Ugly Too." If anyone wants to take a look-see at it on the video side, this is Durwood Merrill. His book. I actually have not read it, and I need to. You're Out and You're Ugly Too. Confessions of an Umpire with Attitude by Durwood Merrill with Jim Dent, forwarded by Ken Griffey Jr. I'll be damned. I did not know that. You had Rod Luciano, who wrote numerous books. And, oh my God, Rod Luciano is probably the biggest character who ever umpired. You do the little shooting of the guns for his out call. Very interesting guy, very unhappy guy. Someone who I actually see a lot of myself in. He decided to step away from umpiring in 1979. He actually did, I think, a quick attempt at acting, but that didn't really go well. But he did color for some nationally televised games. I don't remember if it was ABC or NBC. And then he committed suicide in 1995. And you talk to any old American League umpire, and they will have, I was going to say a story or two, but they're going to have, probably any one of them who worked with Ron Luciano is going to have dozens of stories about the guy. He was just an incredible character. Not a bad umpire either. He was a good umpire. And seemed like a really great guy. And I wish we had in all facets, from umpires to managers, players, coaches, scouts, and announcers. I wish we could have those personalities again. And Stephen Ruderman, I'm going to try and bring that back to the game. It's not going to be easy, but I'm going to do what I can to bring that back. Sticking with umpires in the National League, Eric Gregg wasn't the greatest umpire. And, with ABS, ABS is there to correct the egregious calls a la Eric Gregg, Game 5 of the 1997 NLCS. But he had some real characters and great umpires in the National League. Eric Gregg was a real character, but you had Eddie Montague and Jerry Crawford, who were incredible umpires. Frank Polio, I mentioned earlier, an incredible umpire. Dutch Rennert, his strike call where, he would go down on a knee and go, strike one, just like that. Dutch was a real character. You had Big Lee Wire. You had Big John McSherry. and you had Bruce Froemming, and umpires were celebrated at that time. And you know how celebrated umpires were? In 1986, McDonald's had the little fat man do a commercial for them. I think I can show this, but this is a McDonald's commercial from 1986 with Bruce Froemming. And it's a pretty funny commercial. And it's definitely the kind of commercial you would see back in 1986 that would celebrate the personalities during that time in the game. Take a listen, or a look, or a listen.
Here, McDonald's. I call like I see him, and I gotta tell you, I see more than lettuce and tomato in your McDLT. You've got the works in there. Cheese, onions, pickles, mustard, ketchup, and mayo. You missed all that. What are you, blind? Finally, Bruce Froemming.
We hear you, Bruce. So just for you, call it the hot side hot, cool side.
You know, it's funny. And Bruce was funny. And, as I said, it's just a shame that he's gone, and it's a shame that we don't have many people like Bruce in our great game today. And me, as an aspiring announcer and part-time umpire and host of the INSOMNIAC LUNATIC FRINGE, an occasional writer and harsh baseball critic and disgruntled baseball lifer, I am going to do everything I can to bring characters and personalities back into our great game. There is some good news on that front, and that is Giants manager Tony Vitello. As I mentioned on my first show a couple weeks ago, I love the move to bring in Vitello to manage the Giants because he's got a real personality and he's a character. And at his introductory press conference back in October, well, on the side press conference, a few of us were gathered around him asking him questions, and I asked him about something he had said about the 1993 Phillies. And the 1993 Phillies, they were crazy, but they had some real personalities. He had Nails and Lenny Dykstra, and I know Lenny Dykstra's gotten himself into trouble over the years. You had John Kruk. You had the Wild Thing Mitch Williams. You had Dutch Darren Dalton. You just had some incredible personalities on that team, and you probably don't want players to be that crazy. But Tony Vitello did express a desire to see more personalities, and since he has come to manage the Giants, it is being described as kind of a fraternity culture in the Giants clubhouse. And it makes me think maybe this will finally be the year where this lovable but mediocre team can get over the hump and maybe win 84 or 85 games and sneak in the back door of that third wild card spot in the National League, get into the playoffs, something they've only done once in the last decade. Or twice in the last decade, once in the last 9 years, twice in the last 11 years. And it is little things like that, like having a great clubhouse, that will do it. I mean, the 93 Phillies were far from the best team, but they just had a bunch of guys who loved the game. And John Kruk talked about how late at night after games, a lot of players would stick around in the weight room and drink beer and talk about baseball, and you don't have that today. And I hope the Giants can have that kind of culture with Tony Vitello, and it's great to see just how much the players love him. I'm going to get a close-up look when I go in the clubhouse tomorrow, or if I get there early enough, if I don't sleep in too much tomorrow. And I think the Giants could definitely set a tone for the rest of the league. They're kind of Buster's doing things the old way. I mean, he's got the limited amount of analytics, but he's doing things rather the old way, and you do appreciate it. And now he's bringing in a real character in Tony Vitello to manage, and Vitello in turn is creating a real fun culture in the Giants clubhouse. It's going to be fun to see how this plays out when the regular season gets underway, and less than 3 weeks now, and the games start counting for real. How's this college coach turned big league manager who's never had any experience whatsoever in any role in professional organized baseball could handle the grind and the rigors of a 162 game baseball regular season? I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do. The Giants are off to a 10-2 start in the spring, and these games don't count. And the Giants also, I believe, had the best Cactus League record last year. But you do like to see him play well. Bryce Eldridge, who everyone's got their eyes on in camp, he's been hitting the ball well. There was a hit he had Wednesday night against the Mariners in a televised night game over at Scottsdale Stadium where it was an obvious 2-strike adjustment, fastball on the outer half of the plate, and he just slaps it out into left center field for a base hit. Just a beautiful piece of hitting. The Giants, of course, brought in Hunter Mentz, not Hunter Pence, though I believe Pence, he's still a broadcaster, but they brought in Hunter Mentz, who was the hitting coach, or at least the backup hitting coach to Don Mattingly in Toronto last year, who really prioritized small ball hitting. Tony Vitello brought him in to be the hitting coach this year, and he's really professing that here too. And Buster has been going in that direction in terms of the free agency is signed, in terms of Harrison Bader and Luis Arias, his draft picks like Gavin Killen, the signings of international guys. And it's really encouraging to see this. You've seen some teams the last few years delve into some small ball and show that, yes, actually, you don't need to hit home runs to win. And the thing is, and I'm going to be honest here, and I say this as someone who loves math. I love numbers. I almost have a spiritual connection to numbers. But when baseball is being run on all numbers, and worst of all by people who really aren't baseball people, then you're not going to get good baseball. It's why the baseballs become so unwatchable. I want to show you all something, because we've been told that home runs, it's been studied by the analytics people, and home runs are the quickest and most efficient way to score runs and win games. And WAR, wins above replacement, shows that. Here's the little secret about analytics. It is often used in the corporate world, which baseball has sadly become part of, and this is another example of it, by political parties and by governments to justify narratives. They have their boys and girls jot down some bullshit formulas that are great in a math class, and I would have a lot of fun with them. But at the end of the day, don't mean anything, but they use as a means to convince people that, hey, the numbers show this is the quickest way to do things. And people say, Steven, you're so progressive politically, but you're so conservative when it comes to baseball. Really? Because the people that go into analytics and go into these baseball analytics departments and do this, these are the same kind of people that go to Wall Street and crunch the same kind of numbers to help foreclose people out of their homes. They're the same people that go to health insurance companies and use these same exact formulas to deny people life-saving care. And if you want to be in an analytics department, you have to go to an Ivy League school. And generally, to go to an Ivy League school, you have to have rich and well-connected parents. There's nothing progressive about that at all. It's very exclusionary. It's very classist. But what I'm about to show you proves that this whole we have to hit home runs thing is a lie. When Rob Manfred became commissioner in 2015, what was his biggest complaint? The lack of home runs. So he juiced the baseballs, made them lighter, and had the boys and girls in various analytics department come up with WAR and other formulas to say, well, the numbers show that hitting home runs is the quickest way to score runs and the most efficient way to win games. So we're going to look at home runs by year. And obviously, here in the 2020s, a lot of home runs are being hit. 2021, 5,940 home runs. 2023, 5,868 home runs. 2024, 5,453 home runs. 2025, 5,650 home runs. Compare that to 2005, 5,017 home runs. 2007, 4,957 home runs. 2008, 4,878 home runs. 2009, 5,042 home runs. So, pretty much roughly 1,000 less home runs a year were being hit in the late 2000s than they were being hit today. But in the late 2000s, as you will see, in 2005, 22,325 runs were scored. 2007, 23,322 runs were scored. 2008, 22,584 runs were scored. 2009, 22,419 runs were scored. Big dip off in 2010 because that's when a lot of the people who came up through travel ball who were trying to hit home runs started coming up, and that's one of the reasons Manfred juiced the baseballs. You go here to the last 2 years, 21,344 runs were scored in total in 2024. 21,614 runs were scored in total last season in 2025. So even though less home runs were being hit in the late 2000s, even though less home runs were being hit in the late 2000s than are being hit today, more runs were scoring in the late 2000s than they are today. Which right there disproves the lie, the canard cocked up by the nerds that you have to hit home runs to win. It is all bullshit. It is all a lie. A lie. I have no proof of that this is the case, but most likely being pushed by Rob Manfred and his lackeys to justify the unwatchable style of baseball that we have had to stomach for the last 8 years. It's all a lie. The actual numbers are right there. More home runs are being hit today than they were in the late 2000s, but less runs are being scored today than there were in the late 2000s, which means those numbers show it. You don't have to hit home runs to score runs and win games. WAR is a joke stat that was made up to justify Rob Manfred's narrative that we have to have home runs, that you have to hit home runs to score runs and win games. It is all a lie. When I talk about playing the game the right way, I don't mean not hitting home runs. I mean players playing to their abilities and not having players who are not power guys doing these clownish launch angle things where they bend their backs and twist their arms and swing up and try to hit 500-foot blasts every swing of the bat. That's what I mean by playing the game the right way. And more the reason I'm really excited with the direction the Giants are going, especially with bringing in Hunter Mentz to be the hitting coach. And the Giants, look, there's nothing wrong with some power. It's, if guys can hit for power, great. And Willie Adames can hit 30 home runs a year. He did so last year, becoming the first Giant to hit 30 home runs in a year since Barry Bonds in 2004. And everyone drew, oh my God, the Giants haven't had a 30 home run a year guy since Bonds in 04. Like it was this horrible thing. It was the longest stretch of any team in baseball without a 30 home run guy. But guess what? in that same period, the Giants were tied with the Red Sox for the most world championships in that time period from 2005 to 2024. So the fact that they weren't hitting home runs wasn't a horrible thing. But it's not the worst thing to have guys who can. Willie Adames and Rafael Devers can hit 30 a year. Matt Chapman and Elliot Ramos can hit 20 a year. Doesn't hurt to have some power. But it's great to have contact guys like Jung-Hoo Lee and Harrison Bader and Luis Arias. And perhaps maybe by 2029, Joshua Gonzalez. He is the guy the Giants signed out of the Dominican Republic. He should be ready by 2029. And he hits for contact, doesn't strike out too much. Good, solid hitter. Gavin Killen, who I mentioned earlier, who the Giants drafted in the first round last year. Though I wanted the Giants to draft Kyson Witherspoon, the pitcher, he ended up going to the Red Sox. Contact hitter. Doesn't hit that many home runs, but doesn't strike out and hit for average. Luis Arias is a perfect example of that. Joe Panik was a perfect example of that. Marco Scudero and Freddie Sanchez were perfect examples of that. Jesus Rodriguez, who with a lot of Giants now playing in the World Baseball Classic, he's an example of that. And I would love to see what his 2026 spring training stats are. He's 2 for 12. He's off to a great start. He may not be ready exactly for the big leagues, but he can hit for average, doesn't strike out much, a lot of fun to watch. Drew Gilbert, another guy who can hit for average and doesn't strike out a lot. These are the guys you need. Gilbert's 2 for 9. They're not getting much playing time, unfortunately, and they need to get more playing time. And thankfully, with the World Baseball Classic happening, I anticipate they will get that playing time. But, well, it doesn't hurt to have power when you play in certain ballparks, say the Giants at Oracle Park. You do need guys to hit for contact. It's amazing how Giants fans desperately want that slugger to carry the team, like Barry Bonds back in the old day. But guess what? The Giants didn't win any world championships when Bonds was here. And why don't you want to go back to the kind of baseball they played when they won 3 titles in 5 years, when they were reliant on small ball, contact hitting, pitching, and defense? Thankfully, Buster Posey realizes this, that the way to win in Oracle Park is pitching, defense, small ball, and contact hitting, and speed. That's how you win at Oracle Park. When the Giants, Damon Bruce is out there on some things, but he said it perfectly in 2009 when, the Giants had an historically great pitching staff at the time, and Tim Lincecum and Matt Cain and Jonathan Sanchez, and then, of course, Madison Bumgarner coming up through AAA. He made his debut that September and then was called up for good the following June in 2010. He said, imagine a hybrid of the Giants pitching staff. It would be like getting a good offense, and the way to win at what was then AT&T Park would be having a hybrid of the 1990s Braves pitching, Maddox, Greg Maddux, Tom Glavine, John Smoltz, and the 1980s Cardinals offense. And from 2010 to 2015, that's basically what the Giants had. And in that ballpark, it resulted in 3 world championships, an unprecedented 3 world championships in 5 years, a quasi-dynasty. I say quasi because having that losing season in 2013, going 76 and 86, kind of takes away the dynasty title there. Buster, I imagine, wants to one-up that. And he's building a new young core of contact hitters. And I wish the Giants could find a way to trade for Kyson Witherspoon. But I get the sense Buster's thinking pitching, defense, small ball, contact and speed for the future. And you do that, you could have another run like the Giants had in the early 2010s. That's how you do things at Oracle Park. All right, that'll do it. This has been the Insomniac Lunatic Fringe here from Scottsdale. I will be at Scottsdale Stadium tomorrow. I'm going to try and get some interviews. Wish me luck on that. Thanks for listening. Take care. Have a good night, and I will talk to you soon.